So the QAPP and the detailed performance report, or the body of evidence, if you're going down that pathway, have to show the organisational chart and the key personnel involved there. So the key to all of this is transparency and independence in the chain of custody. To be clear, subsidiaries of the claimant business are not independent. Collecting the samples and testing them in your own lab is not independent. This might prove challenging for some PhD projects going forward, but if industry is expected to comply with this standard, I can't see why universities shouldn't do so. Preparing the detailed performance report should be done by a separate entity to the claimant, so that, again, there's independence maintained there. Now, this will inevitably need to be done for a fee, likely by a university or a consultant, and that's okay under SQIDEP, as long as that relationship is declared and the protocol requires the submission of a statutory declaration with that report that outlines what that relationship is. As Andrew asked earlier, multiple sites are permitted under the protocol, but the protocol remains silent on how the data can be handled. It leaves the onus up to the claimant or the consultant who's preparing the report for them to demonstrate statistically that multiple sites, that the multiple sites are from the same data set and they can be combined. It's good to include different climatic conditions, but it might produce different data sets that can't be combined. Multiple metrics are recommended by SQIDEP because using one or the other can influence the outcomes. Some of loads in particular can be influenced by lost water. Inaccurate flow measurement can suggest load reduction, even though the concentrations leaving are the same as those entering. Average concentration removal efficiency, CRE, and efficiency ratio can be influenced by low and high concentrations respectively. The key point to note is that the goal of all of this is to demonstrate that the outlet data set is significantly lower than the inlet data set to a 90% confidence level. This example here that you can see on the right-hand side is a hypothetical data set that indicates a device that consistently removes 7 milligrams per litre of pollutant. And yet you can see from the CRE metric there that 7 milligrams per litre, that removal efficiency is weighted more by the low concentrations, the CRE metric weights those low concentrations more than the high concentrations, even though it's consistently doing 7 milligrams per litre. This second scenario is an example of what sometimes occurs, particularly when your inlet concentrations are very low, and you might get a slightly higher outlet concentration. As you can see, that one event in this particular data set changes the average CRE by 10%, but the ER by 1%. I'll just scroll back to the previous one. So it goes from 15 to 14 for the ER and 31 to 21% for the CRE. So it's important to see all of the metrics together, not in isolation. So you can be transparent about potential outliers and remove any bias that might be associated with one or the other of the metrics.
So Darren, just quickly
on that. One big question. Yeah, sure.
Quick on that previous slide, just to make sure people are clear on it. So that one where the concentrations come out slightly higher, that's because there's a low inflow, or not because, but that hasn't helped. And that's just a means of dealing with situations where the actual conditions produce an outcome that's a bit erroneous and weights it accordingly so that it doesn't overly influence the final result. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where, again, we're looking at a data set that is hypothetical here,
Yep.
and it's in isolation to the others. So this might be a total suspended solids data set, where you then have total phosphorus and total nitrogen data as well, which isn't erroneous and all makes sense. So the question then becomes, do you keep it? Do you remove it? Is it an outlier? I think, again, it comes back to that transparency, that, look, at these low influent concentrations, you might every now and then get a result that does that. And to remove it arbitrarily starts to ring of cherry picking, but to leave it there and be transparent about the influence is probably a better approach.
Understood.
I might just add, this is sort of one of those issues that I guess has given rise to the need for SQIDEP, because what's being presented at the moment to a lot of authorities where people have done testing, and I guess some of the things Darren's highlighted here, it's really easy to manipulate the statistics in relation to these issues. It's something that's really astounded me in my exposure to this, how sensitive performance results can be to the statistics and metrics you use. And it looks like the outputs all end up seeming the same. So if someone's talking about 60% TSS reduction, most people would assume that that's all based on comparing apples and apples. So we think this is really important, that by having SQIDEP in place, we get some transparency about the claims and the basis of them in the marketplace.
Thanks, Al. Does that answer your question, Andrew?
Yes, it does. It's a really very interesting point, actually. I've done a bit of this testing in the past myself, and I've seen results occasionally like that. And Alan's quite right. It's very easy to manipulate your statistics. So it's good to have something that shows transparently how it's done.